The Mafia boss was stepping out of his car when something caught his eye. A little girl, dirty jacket, tangled hair, sat on the curb outside a bakery, hugging her knees to keep warm. Homeless, invisible, the kind of child people look through, not at. He was about to turn away, until he saw the necklace. A small silver pendant hung from her neck, dull with age, scratched in a very specific way. The boss froze. That necklace wasn't jewelry. It was a family heirloom, passed down only to the firstborn, lost the night his world collapsed. His breath caught. He took a step closer. The girl noticed him staring and instinctively clutched the pendant, eyes wide with fear. "Don't take it," she whispered. "My mama said it keeps me safe." The words hit him like a gunshot, because those were the exact words his own mother used to say. The same words spoken the night his daughter disappeared. His hands began to shake. He knelt in front of the girl, voice breaking despite all the power he'd built. "Where? Did you get that?" The girl swallowed hard. "My mom said my real daddy gave it to her, before he went away forever." The Mafia boss lowered his head. For the first time in decades, the man who ruled the underworld couldn't stop himself from crying. "Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind that necklace will destroy everything the Mafia boss thought he lost, and everything he thought he was." Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Vincent Torino commanded respect with nothing more than a glance. At 58, his silver hair was perfectly combed, his charcoal suit tailored to precision, and his presence commanded attention wherever he walked. He was the kind of man who owned half the city without anyone needing to ask how, the kind who could end careers with a phone call and start wars with a handshake. But 12 years ago, Vincent Torino had been someone else entirely. Back then, he was just Vinny, a mid-level enforcer trying to make ends meet. He lived in a modest apartment in Little Italy with his wife Maria and their 4-year-old daughter Sophia. They weren't rich, but they were happy. Maria would sing while cooking dinner. Sophia would draw pictures of their family with crayons that never stayed inside the lines. And Vinny would come home each night knowing that whatever darkness he dealt with during the day, this small apartment held all the light in his world. The necklace had belonged to his grandmother, passed down through 4 generations of Torino women. It was simple silver with an intricate cross design, but the scratches told stories. His grandmother had worn it through the Depression. His mother had clutched it during the war, and when Sophia was born, Maria had placed it around their daughter's neck, whispering the same words her own mother had spoken. "This will keep you safe, my angel." Sophia never took it off. Even at Xiaokahami, bath time, Maria would carefully work around the delicate chain. Even when Sophia's friends at preschool asked why she wore the same necklace every day, she would touch it and smile. "My mama says it keeps me safe." The night everything changed started like any other. Vinny had been called to handle a situation at the docks. Routine business. He kissed Maria goodbye, ruffled Sophia's hair as she colored in her princess book, and promised he'd be home before bedtime. "Don't forget to read me a story, Papa," Sophia had called from the kitchen table. Her crayon paused mid-stroke. "Never, Principessa," he had replied, using the pet name that made her giggle every time. He never made it home that night. The warehouse explosion lit up the harbor like a second sun. By the time the smoke cleared and the authorities finished asking their questions, Vinny's world had been erased. The apartment building had caught fire in the chaos that followed. 17 people died that night, including a young mother and her 4-year-old daughter, who couldn't escape their 3rd-floor unit in time. The bodies were burned beyond recognition. The dental records confirmed what the investigators already knew. Maria and Sophia Torino were gone. Vinny had stood in the ashes of his life, holding a melted crayon and a fragment of a princess coloring book, and something inside him had died with them. The man who emerged from that tragedy wasn't the same person who had kissed his wife goodbye 12 hours earlier. This new man was forged from grief and rage, tempered by loss and sharpened by revenge. Vincent Torino built his empire on the bones of everyone who had been responsible for that night. He climbed the ranks not through charm or connections, but through a calculated brutality that made hardened criminals nervous. He eliminated his enemies with surgical precision. He accumulated wealth and power like armor, creating layers of protection around the empty space where his heart used to be. For 12 years, Vincent had convinced himself that the past was buried. He never spoke of Maria or Sophia. He never visited their graves. He never allowed himself to remember the sound of Sophia's laughter or the way Maria hummed while folding laundry. Those memories were locked away in a place so deep that even he couldn't reach them anymore. But now, staring at this homeless child, clutching the necklace he thought had been destroyed in the fire, every wall he had built came crashing down. The girl couldn't be more than 7 years old, with dark hair that hung in tangled waves around her face. Her clothes were too big, probably donations from a shelter. Her shoes had holes in the toes, but her eyes, those dark brown eyes that seemed too old for such a young face, held a spark of defiance that reminded him of someone he had tried to forget. "What's your name?" Vincent asked, his voice gentler than it had been in over a decade. The girl studied him carefully, the way children learn to evaluate adults when trust is a luxury they can't afford. "Emma," she said finally. "Emma Santos." Santos. Not Torino. But that didn't mean anything. Children in the system got shuffled around, names changed, records lost. Vincent's mind raced through possibilities, each one more impossible than the last. "How old are you, Emma?" "Almost 8, she said, lifting her chin with pride. "My birthday's next month." The math didn't work. If Sophia had survived somehow, she would be 16 now, not 8. But Vincent found himself doing the calculations anyway, grasping for any thread of hope, no matter how thin. "Tell me about your mother," he said carefully. "The one who gave you the necklace." Emma's expression shifted, growing sad. "She died when I was little. I don't remember her much, but the lady at the home said she loved me very much. She said Mama fought real hard to keep me safe before she got sick." Vincent's chest tightened. "What about your father? Did anyone ever tell you about him?" Emma shook her head. "Just that he had to go away before I was born. But Mama told the ladies at the hospital that he gave her this." She touched the necklace protectively. "She said it would keep me safe until he could come back for me." The words echoed in Vincent's memory. The same phrase Maria used to whisper to Sophia every night. The same promise he had made to his daughter before leaving that final time. But how could it be possible? He had seen the bodies. He had identified what remained. The dental records had been conclusive, unless they hadn't been conclusive at all. Vincent's mind began working with the systematic precision that had built his empire. What if the bodies in the fire hadn't been Maria and Sophia? What if someone had made a mistake? What if the chaos of that night had created opportunities for confusion, for switched identities, for desperate people to disappear? His hands trembled as he reached into his jacket, not for a weapon, but for his phone. There were people who owed him favors, people who could access records that had been sealed for over a decade, people who could dig deeper than any official investigation ever had. But first, he needed to get this child somewhere safe. "Emma," he said softly, "are you hungry?" She nodded slowly, still watching him with cautious eyes. "There's a restaurant across the street. Good food, warm inside. Would you like to come with me?" "I'm not supposed to go with strangers," she said, but her resolve was weakening. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery was making her stomach growl audibly. "Smart girl," Vincent said with approval. "Your mama taught you well." He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, one of the legitimate ones. "My name is Vincent. I own some restaurants in the city. I help kids who don't have anywhere to go." It was partly true. Vincent's legitimate businesses included a network of shelters and youth programs. Guilt money, his accountant called it, though Vincent had never admitted why he felt compelled to help homeless children. Now he knew. Emma stared at the business card, her small fingers tracing the embossed letters. Vincent watched her internal struggle, recognizing the survival instincts of a child who had learned too early that kindness often came with a price. "I have to stay here," she said finally. "Mrs. Chen from the bakery sometimes gives me bread when she closes. If I leave, she won't know where to find me." Vincent glanced toward the bakery window where an elderly Asian woman was arranging pastries in a display case. The way she periodically looked toward Emma told him this wasn't the first time the child had waited outside her shop. "Mrs. Chen," Vincent called out, approaching the bakery door. The woman looked up, her expression immediately shifting to wariness as she took in his expensive suit and the unmistakable aura of power that surrounded him. "You police?" she asked in accented English, her hand hovering near what Vincent assumed was a panic button beneath the counter. "No, ma'am. I'm someone who helps children. Emma out there, she's been coming to you for food?" Mrs. Chen's defensive posture softened slightly. "That little girl, she's so hungry. I give her what I can, but I cannot take her home. Immigration, they ask too many questions about children who not belong to you." Vincent understood. Mrs. Chen was protecting herself and her business, but she was also protecting Emma in the only way she could. He pulled out his wallet and placed $500 bills on the counter. "This is for all the kindness you've shown her. And this," he added another 500, "is to make sure she has a warm place to sleep tonight, while I figure out what comes next." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened. "Mister, this too much money." "It's not enough," Vincent replied quietly. "Not for what you've done." He returned to Emma, who had been watching the exchange with the sharp attention of someone who had learned to read adult conversations for signs of danger or opportunity. "Mrs. Chen says you can sleep in the warm room above her shop tonight. She's going to make you dinner." Emma's face lit up with hope before suspicion clouded her features again. "What do you want from me?" The question pierced Vincent's heart. This child, who should have been playing with dolls and learning to read, had been conditioned to expect payment for every kindness. "I want to understand where that necklace came from," he said honestly, "and I want to make sure you're safe while I figure that out." Emma studied his face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "Okay, but I keep the necklace." "Of course you do." As Mrs. Chen led Emma into the bakery, Vincent stepped into the alley behind the building and made the first of several phone calls that would change everything. "Marco, it's Vincent. I need you to pull some records for me. Everything you can find on a house fire 12 years ago, 1247 Mulberry Street. I want to know who handled the body identification, who signed off on the dental records, and who processed the insurance claims." Marco Santangelo had been Vincent's information broker for 8 years. If there was a paper trail anywhere in the city, Marco could find it. More importantly, he never asked questions about why Vincent needed the information. "How deep you want me to dig, boss?" "Deep enough to find out if someone lied to me 12 years ago. And Marco, I want this done quietly. No official channels, no digital footprints. Cash only. Give me 48 hours. Vincent's second call was to Dr. Patricia Moss, the city's most discreet private investigator. She specialized in cases that required sensitivity and absolute confidentiality. "Dr. Moss, I need a genetic test run. Completely off the books. I'll have a sample for you within the hour." "What kind of sample are we talking about?" "Hair, from a child. I need to know if there's a familial match to someone specific. I can have preliminary results in 6 hours. Full analysis in 24. My usual rate plus discretion fee. Money isn't an issue." Vincent's third call was the most difficult. He dialed a number he hadn't used in 5 years. One that belonged to Father Rodriguez at St. Mary's Cathedral. The priest had been Maria's confessor, had married them, had baptized Sophia. "Father, it's Vincent Torino." There was a long pause. "Vincent, I wondered if you'd ever call again. I need to ask you about the night of the fire. About Maria and Sophia." Another pause. "Vincent, we've been through this. I performed the last rites myself. I was there when... Were you there when they identified the bodies?" "No. By the time I arrived at the hospital, that had already been done." "Why are you asking these questions now? After all these years?" Vincent closed his eyes. Because I think I might have been wrong about what happened that night. Father Rodriguez was quiet for so long that Vincent thought the call had dropped. Finally, the priest spoke, his voice heavy with something that sounded like regret. Vincent, there's something I've wanted to tell you for years, but I didn't know how. The night of the fire, Maria came to confession that afternoon. She was frightened about something. She wouldn't tell me what, but she asked me to pray for Sophia's protection. She said if anything happened to her, I should remember that sometimes the only way to save someone is to let them disappear. The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He leaned against the brick wall of the alley, his legs suddenly unsteady. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because you were so consumed with revenge that I thought it would only make your pain worse, and because I wasn't sure what she meant. But Vincent, if you've found something, if there's a chance, I'll call you back, Father. Vincent ended the call and stood in the growing darkness. Pieces of a 12-year-old puzzle beginning to form a picture he was afraid to believe. Maria had been scared. She had talked about disappearing. And now a child who could be the right age with the right story was wearing the necklace he thought had been destroyed. But there was another possibility, one that made his blood run cold. What if Sophia had survived the fire, but Maria hadn't? What if his daughter had grown up, had a child of her own, and then died young, just as the system claimed Emma's mother had? The genetic test would tell him if Emma was his granddaughter. But Vincent was beginning to suspect that the truth was going to be far more complicated than a simple yes or no answer. He looked up at the window above the bakery, where warm light spilled onto the street. Emma was safe for tonight. Tomorrow he would begin the process of unraveling the biggest lie of his life. And if someone had deliberately deceived him about his family's death, if someone had allowed him to live in agony for 12 years while his daughter or granddaughter struggled alone on the streets, Vincent Torino was going to remind the city exactly why crossing his family was the last mistake anyone ever made. The man who had built an empire on revenge was about to discover that his greatest enemy might have been the truth itself. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that made the city feel smaller, more intimate. Vincent had barely slept, his mind cycling through possibilities and impossibilities until dawn crept through his penthouse windows. By 7 a.m., he was dressed and driving back to the bakery, his hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Mrs. Chen was already preparing for the morning rush when he knocked on her door. Emma appeared at the top of the narrow staircase, looking more rested than she had in weeks. The necklace caught the morning light as she descended, each step bringing Vincent closer to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, his voice carrying a gentleness that surprised even him. Emma nodded, clutching a small backpack that contained everything she owned. "Mrs. Chen made me pancakes. Real ones. Not the kind from the shelter that taste like cardboard." The casual way she referenced shelter food reminded Vincent of just how much this child had endured. He knelt to her eye level, studying her features in the clearer morning light, the shape of her nose, the way her eyebrows arched when she was thinking, the stubborn set of her jaw when she was determined about something. Each detail felt like an echo of someone he had loved and lost. "Emma, I want to take you somewhere today. Somewhere safe where we can talk more about your necklace and your mama. Would that be okay?" She tilted her head, considering. "Are you going to try to take it away from me?" "Never. I promise you that." Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. "Okay, but if I don't like where we're going, you have to bring me back here." "Deal." Vincent's estate sat on 30 acres outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and ancient oak trees. He had bought it 5 years ago as a fortress, a place where he could retreat from the complexities of his empire. But as they drove through the gates, he saw it through Emma's eyes. The sprawling gardens, the fountain in the circular drive, the mansion that looked like something from a fairy tale. "You live here?" Emma pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the glass. "I do. What do you think? It's like the castle in my storybook, the one where the princess lives." Vincent's chest tightened. Sophia had loved fairy tales about princesses in castles. Maria used to read them to her every night, changing her voice for each character until Sophia dissolved into giggles. Inside, Vincent's housekeeper, Elena, greeted them with the kind of warm efficiency that came from years of managing a household without asking questions. She was a grandmother herself, and her maternal instincts kicked in immediately when she saw Emma. "This young lady looks like she could use a proper breakfast," Elena said, her accent carrying hints of her native Colombia. "I already ate," Emma said politely. "Pancakes from a bakery are good," Elena replied with a knowing smile. "But they're not a real breakfast. Come, let me show you the kitchen. You can help me make eggs the way my grandmother taught me." As Elena led Emma away, chattering about secret ingredients and family recipes, Vincent retreated to his study. The room was lined with leather-bound books he never read and expensive art he barely noticed. But today, it would serve as a command center for the most important investigation of his life. Marco's call came precisely at 9 a.m. "Boss, I got some interesting information about that fire." "Tell me." The initial body identification was handled by Dr. Franklin Reese, who was the deputy coroner at the time. Guy had a reputation for being thorough, but he also had gambling debts. Big ones. The kind that make people flexible about their professional standards. Vincent's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of flexible?" "The kind where dental records get mixed up, where bodies get misidentified, where paperwork disappears and reappears with different names on it. Reese died in a car accident 3 years after your family's case. But before he died, he made some interesting deposits to an offshore account." "How interesting?" $50,000 2 days after he signed off on the identification of your wife and daughter. Another $25,000 a month later. Vincent felt something cold and dangerous settling in his chest. Someone had paid the coroner to lie about the identification. Someone had wanted Vincent to believe his family was dead. Who made the payments? That's where it gets complicated, boss. The money came from a shell company that traces back to another shell company that eventually leads to a bank in the Cayman Islands. But I found something else. The insurance payout for your family's deaths? It went to a beneficiary account that was set up the day before the fire. Vincent's mind raced. Who was the beneficiary? Someone named Sarah Martinez. Address listed as a post office box that was closed a week after the money was transferred. The pieces were forming a picture that made Vincent's blood run cold. Someone had orchestrated the entire thing. The fire, the false identification, the insurance fraud. Someone had wanted his family to disappear and had been willing to pay handsomely to make it happen. "Marco, I need you to find everything you can about Sarah Martinez. Every record, every trace, every person who might have known her. Already on it, boss. But there's something else. The apartment building where your family lived? It wasn't supposed to be empty that night. According to the fire department report, there were supposed to be 43 residents in the building, but only 17 bodies were found." Vincent's hands began to shake. Where were the other 26 people? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But boss, if someone evacuated part of that building before the fire, if they knew it was coming, then Maria and Sophia might have been evacuated too. It's possible. Vincent ended the call and sat in the silence of his study, the weight of possibility crushing down on him. If his family had survived, if they had been hidden away while he grieved and built his empire on the foundation of their supposed deaths, then someone had stolen 12 years of his life. Someone was going to pay for that. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway, her small hand wrapped around a glass of orange juice that Elena had undoubtedly pressed into her palm. "Elena said you might want to see me," she said shyly. Vincent composed himself, pushing the rage down deep where it couldn't frighten her. "How was breakfast?" "Really good. Elena knows how to make eggs fluffy like clouds." Emma stepped into the room, her eyes wide as she took in the books and paintings. "Is this your office?" "It is. What do you think?" "It's very fancy, but kind of lonely." The observation cut deeper than Vincent expected. "Why do you say that?" Emma shrugged, settling into one of the large leather chairs. Her feet didn't touch the ground, making her look even smaller and more vulnerable. My mama used to say that fancy places without people in them are just pretty prisons. She said real homes have pictures of families and toys on the floor and cookies that smell good when you walk in the door. Vincent looked around his study with new eyes. Emma was right. For all its expensive trappings, the room was sterile, empty of any sign that a human being actually lived here. There were no photographs, no personal mementos, no evidence of the man he had been before grief transformed him into something harder and more distant. Your mama sounds like she was very wise. She was. She knew lots of things, like how to make soup from almost nothing, and how to tell which adults were safe and which ones weren't, and how to hide money so bad people couldn't find it. Emma's voice grew quieter. She said that's why she had to give me away, so the bad people wouldn't find me. Vincent's pulse quickened. Bad people? What kind of bad people? Emma touched the necklace unconsciously, a gesture that was becoming as familiar to Vincent as his own heartbeat. She never said exactly, but sometimes she would get really scared, and we would have to pack everything really fast and move to a new place. She would hold me tight and tell me that someday it would be safe for us to stay in one place, but not yet. How many times did you move? I don't remember all of them. I was little, but lots of times. We lived in motels and apartments and sometimes in cars. Mama always said we were looking for my real daddy, but he was hiding too, and we had to be careful not to let the wrong people find us first. The words hit Vincent like physical blows. A woman and child on the run, hiding from unnamed threats, searching for someone who might not even exist anymore. It painted a picture of a life lived in constant fear, constantly looking over their shoulders for dangers they couldn't name. Emma, do you remember your mama's real name? Not the name she might have used when you were hiding, but her real name? Emma frowned, concentrating. She had lots of names. Sometimes she was Sarah, sometimes she was Maria, sometimes she was other things. But when she got really sick at the end, when the medicine made her confused, she would call herself by a different name. Vincent's heart stopped. What name? Sophia. She would say, Sophia's mama is here. Sophia's mama won't leave you. I thought she was talking about me, but my name is Emma, not Sophia. Emma's voice grew sad. I think maybe she had another little girl before me, one who got lost. The room spun around Vincent. Sophia, his daughter's name. The woman who had raised Emma, who had been running and hiding and searching, had called herself by his daughter's name when her guard was down. But that would mean Sophia hadn't died in the fire. It would mean she had grown up, had a child of her own, and spent years searching for a father who thought she was dead. It would mean Emma wasn't just connected to his family. Emma was his granddaughter. Dr. Moss's call came that afternoon while Emma was napping in one of the guest bedrooms, exhausted by the morning's revelations and Elena's determined efforts to put some meat on her bones. Vincent, I have your results. Tell me. The child is definitely related to your genetic sample. The markers are consistent with a grandparent-grandchild relationship. She's your family, Vincent. No doubt about it. Vincent closed his eyes, feeling 12 years of grief and rage crystallize into something sharp and purposeful. Emma was his granddaughter, which meant Sophia had survived, had lived long enough to have a child, had spent years running from something or someone who had made her life a nightmare. There's something else, Dr. Moss continued. I ran the child's DNA through some databases I have access to. Quietly, of course. Her mother's death certificate lists her as Sophia Martinez, age 28. Cause of death listed as complications from pneumonia. But here's what's interesting. The hospital where she died had no record of anyone by that name being treated there. Another lie. Another deliberate misdirection. Someone's been very careful to erase traces of this woman and her child, Dr. Moss said. The kind of careful that takes resources and connections. Vincent thanked Dr. Moss and ended the call. He sat in the growing darkness of his study, pieces of the puzzle finally forming a complete picture. Someone had orchestrated his family's disappearance 12 years ago. They had paid a coroner to lie about the body identification. They had forced Maria and Sophia into hiding, And when Sophia grew up and tried to find her way back to him, they had made sure she disappeared again. But they had made one mistake. They had left Emma alive. Vincent's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop looking, or the girl disappears too." The threat was clear. Someone had been watching, waiting to see if Vincent would discover the truth. And now they were willing to kill his granddaughter to protect whatever secret they had been guarding for 12 years. Vincent smiled for the first time in years. It wasn't a pleasant expression. They had no idea who they were threatening. They thought they were dealing with the grieving widower who had stumbled through his family's funeral 12 years ago. Instead, they had awakened Vincent Torino, the man who had built an empire on the bones of his enemies. And Vincent Torino was about to remind them that some people were too dangerous to threaten. The war for his family's truth was about to begin. The man who had spent 12 years building walls around his heart discovered that love never truly dies. It just waits for the right moment to break through. Vincent Torino thought he had lost everything in that fire, but he had actually gained something far more precious than any empire he could build. Sometimes the most powerful people in the world are brought to their knees not by enemies or rivals, but by the simple truth that family is the only thing that really matters.